Well, welcome everybody to the session entitled Best Practices in Zero Waste Contracting with Service Providers. We'll do some quick introductions and then we'll get right into it. Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Martman, Director of Sustainability with SBM. We're a janitorial service provider. I have been a waste and recycling professional for the past 15 years. And prior to SBM, I worked in various capacities with commercial businesses towards zero waste, including a lot of waste vendor management. Next is, next slide, Portia. Thank you. Megna. And Megna, I'm sorry, I don't want to mispronounce your last name. Is it Dewan?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. You would think I would know this by now. Megna Dewan has a Bachelor of Science in Clinical Biology and a Master of Public Health in Environmental and Occupational Sciences. She started her career with Johnson & Johnson, supporting medical device manufacturing operations. She also has supported biopharmaceutical commercial packaging and raw production manufacturing in both an EHS capacity as well as operations. Currently, she works for Nestle as an environmental health, safety, and sustainability manager, supporting the research and development pilot plant. And our next speaker is Denise Braun. Denise is founder and principal of All About Waste and has over 20 years of experience with sustainable buildings and solutions. She is responsible for several remarkable zero waste projects, such as certifying the first true zero waste building in San Francisco and the first true zero waste construction site to achieve the pre-certification path. She is a recognized expert in waste management, circular economy, and sustainability initiatives in commercial applications. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to start with a couple of slides to set the context for some of this discussion, and then we'll get into the case studies specifically from Megna and Denise. So let me just share my screen. One moment, here we go. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, so there we go. So just to set the stage a little bit about zero waste language and scope of work and contracts. So when developing a new contract or scope of work for a service provider or vendor, that is usually the time to include zero waste language as part of the base level service. So this will make sure that the zero waste component you want your vendor to participate in or be responsible for is included within that scope of work. When it's not included, it can be difficult to enforce, and you may run into above base fees or extra service fees pertaining to zero waste related programs or requests made of your service provider. If you have to put an RFP out for services where you get quotes or responses from different vendors, make sure to add mandatory questions related to your zero waste requirements that the vendors can answer. That way you get an idea of their approach and understanding of this aspect of service that you're specifying. Also, make sure to be clear on how you want the service provider to be involved with zero waste and what KPIs or service provisions need to be included. Now in this, we're not providing you with specific contract language around zero waste, as that will vary widely depending on the type of service or type of vendor and the role that they play in zero waste for your operations or location. But services can include janitorial custodial services, food service providers, caterers, waste haulers, regulated hazardous waste vendors, landscapers, delivery partners, and so many other types of vendors that are crucial to the success of zero waste programs. Now, of course, there can be challenges with including zero waste language in vendor contracts. I'm sure many of you on the call may be very familiar with some of these. Often those responsible for implementing zero waste programs or pursuing certification are not always the contract holders, and the contracts in place may apply to multiple sites and not just your site. So it's often hard to maybe get some changes in existing contracts. Let's see, yeah, that's the main point there. But you can still have conversations with your service providers. Even if you're not able to influence contract language now or for existing contracts. A couple of points that I find are very important about contacting vendors or service providers in relation to zero waste programs is, first of all, know your objective. Why are you contacting the vendor? Are you trying to get information about the services they provide? Are you trying to obtain data? Are you requesting a zero waste related process or program change? Make sure you know what you want to ask of the vendor and what result you want to achieve in order to have a productive conversation. And then second, always try to go through the proper channels first. Blind calling an existing vendor, like if you're just Googling them, like, oh, here's a number to call, that should be your last resort. Many vendors, there's typically an assigned point of contact or account manager for your business or site. And depending on the size of your company, there may even be a person or department responsible for maintaining vendor or service provider contracts and relationships. So you always want to try that department or person first. That may be a procurement department, purchasing, vendor management. It could be someone in facilities or someone else in operations. When you involve them with the process first and talk to them about what you need and why you need it, they're usually able to help. They may already have the information you're looking for. They may be able to further support your effort and even talk to the vendor on your behalf, or they may be able to point you in the right direction if they can't. Third, it's really important to understand what services the vendor is already contracted to provide. Is what you're asking in the zero waste context already included within that scope of service? Or would a process change result in an added cost or fee from the vendor? For example, if you want just electronic waste information and you're reaching out to a recycling hauler, they may not actually service your electronic waste, but just your traditional recyclables. So you won't get very far with that conversation. Similarly, let's say you place a compost bin next to every recycling bin at your site, and you ask your custodial vendor to collect this. They may be 100% on board, but it may take extra time and involve extra labor to collect that additional material stream if it's not already included with that scope of work. And in that example, you want to make sure you also have an outlet or a vendor to remove that offsite if you're not processing on-site. So always discuss your objective and what you hope to achieve with the vendor when you're having that conversation. They even may have ideas on how to help work with you and the site towards your objectives, maybe things that you hadn't thought of before, or things that they can expand it in other areas of your site. For example, if you want to switch over to durable cups in the cafeteria, your food service vendor may need time to make that change, but they may also have ideas on how to extend that program to coffee cups in break areas, or they may have other ideas on switching other disposables for durables in the cafeteria. In the example of the added compost service that we used earlier, the janitorial provider may be able to work with you to come up with a plan that's cost neutral if it's not in their scope instead of costing extra. You can also ask what they do for other clients. A lot of times vendors work with a lot of different companies across the board, and they may be working on similar things that you want to work toward and may have ideas that they've seen elsewhere. And I think maybe we can get to some of this next part in the Q&A, but what do you do when you run into roadblocks? I think that is also very common. There's a lot of successes out there, but there are also a lot of challenges. Either with a vendor or even with an internal department. So I think my comment on that is be persistent, remind them how the request aligns with the goals of the company. If it's within the contract and the vendor's not supporting the request, ask for help with enforcement of who can support that. Also find other allies within your organization for support. They may be able to help find additional avenues or other ways to promote from within, from the right stakeholders. So that's my little introduction. I will stop there. And I will turn it over to Meghna.
Thanks, Amy.
And sorry, Meghna, 1 second. I have your slides here. All right, can you see Meghna's slides? All right, go ahead, Meghna.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Meghna Dewan, and I am the Environmental Health and Safety Sustainability Manager for Nestle. Next slide, please. So I wanted to provide a high-level overview of who we are, what we do, and how some of the things that Amy was talking about, how it affects our site specifically. So I'm sure many of you have heard of the company Nestle. It's obviously a very large company. We've been around for over 150 years. We have over 2,000 brands, close to 300,000 employees, around 400 factories across the country, and we are 93 billion in sales. So we're a very, very large company, and True Waste really impacts us on all different levels across the globe. Next slide, please. This is just a high-level overview of some of the products that we have within Nestle, although there's different branding. Obviously, this is not an exhaustive list, but we have Perrier, Pellegrino, Nespresso pods, breakfast essentials. So what I really wanted to draw attention to is the different pillars within Nestle. So we have Nestle Purina, we have Nestle Waters, Nespresso, Gerber, and then Nestle Health Sciences. So these are all different sectors within the Nestle company, and I represent Nestle Health Sciences. So I'll get into a little bit about what we do in the next couple slides. Next slide, please. So who is Nestle Health Sciences? What are we? What's our vision? And what do we do? So what we believe is we're empowering healthier lives through nutrition. We're basically a health science company where we've mixed nutrition into building healthier lives. So our market is predominantly vitamins, supplements, things like that. So we really have this philosophy where we're trying to build healthier lives through nutrition. We're not a pharmaceutical company. We're not selling, prescription medications. It's all really just vitamins, health supplements, things like that. So that's where Nestle Health Science stands. Next slide, please. Some of the portfolio information about Nestle Health Science. We are the #2 company in adult nutrition and medical nutrition. We are #1 in vitamin, minerals, and supplements. We're a relatively new company, but as of last year, we had 1,000 employees globally, and we have more than, close to 500 different products that we continue to launch. Next slide. Now, within Nestle Health Sciences, there's obviously multiple facilities that support us. Where I'm located, it's at their headquarter facility in Bridgewater, New Jersey. And this site specifically is a research and development pilot plant operation site. So what that means is we produce products pre-production. We have a very large research and development facility with many different people that are very talented. So they work with different innovations, different formulations, using new technology, different formulations and recipes for the product that they test out in the research and development platform. Then they scale up, but just at a pilot plant scale-up operation, but in small volumes before it hits the commercial manufacturing. So it is about a 200 employee site where it's predominantly R&D scientists, some pilot plant operation employees. And then since we are the headquarters site, we have marketing, sales, and IT. So many of the offices that support our pilot plant launches. Next slide, please. So I won't get into too much between zero waste and zero waste to landfill. Many of you already know what this is, but what I wanted to draw attention to is being truly zero waste to landfill is a huge initiative that we have, especially within Nestle Health Sciences. So as I get into the next couple of slides, I'll go into detail about how we're trying to obtain our True Waste certification and what are some of our what are some of the things that are going well and some areas of improvement. Next slide, please. So again, the True Waste certification is a certification that goes above just being zero waste to landfill. It requires a lot of information on the back end, right? And one of the most critical pieces of this certification is obtaining that 90% diversion from landfill. So it focuses on reduction and reuse. It incorporates leadership, supply chain, and employee awareness. And there's a lot that goes into it. And this has been a huge learning opportunity for the facility because it's doing a lot of legwork on the back end, right? How are we making sure that we have language with our vendors that help support true waste certification? How do we make sure that we're really going beyond just recycling, but building a mentality and employee awareness that helps drive this true waste certification? How are we, recycling at the site? It's not just about single stream recycling and, composting. How do we make sure that we're using reusable cutlery if possible, or how are we thinking outside the box? So this true waste certification that we're trying to obtain has really opened our eyes to the things that we need to do in order to be a better and more sustainable site. So what I'm trying to drive home here is this 90% is key in order to obtain the certification, and we are not there yet as a site. Next slide, please. Now, although we're not yet obtaining our certification, part of this journey in order to get it requires a lot of training, awareness, gap assessments. So some of the things that we're doing at our site to help us drive this initiative is reuse of coffee mugs, right? So at our site, you won't see anyone with a paper cup or styrofoam cup. All of our cup and water cups are all washed and cleaned. We use microfiber cloths for cleaning to reduce our paper waste. So microfiber cloths are all washed and laundered, and we reuse those. We have settings on all of our laptops and computers that require duplex printing. So if you go and print something, you'll automatically have it two-sided. You have to go out of your way to have it single-sided. We are Nestle, so we drink a ton of coffee here. We do use Nespresso pods, obviously, at our facility, but all of our Nespresso pods get recycled back through the coffee pod recycling program. And, that's not something that we can do. If anyone drinks Nespresso at home, you can buy those bags individually and recycle them, personally too. But that is something that we partake in. Our drum take back program. So any chemicals that we're using on site, we're reusing them. So the vendors that we're working with will come back after the chemical is used, and they'll take those empty drums back so they're not just being wasted. We, as a pilot plant, we have gowning that's required, so full lab coats that get laundered, so they're reused, so we don't have disposable gowning. Part of our PPE that's required when you're out in the lab or in the pilot plant is beard nets, hair nets, all of that, hearing protection, masks, obviously because of COVID, and we just started recycling them. So all PPE within our facility is being recycled. And then on top of that, we also have a separate stream of recycling for all of our plastic wrap. So bubble wrap that we get from our manufacturers, plastic wrap that might be generated, that's all being recycled. So what I'm trying to drive home here is, as we've made this commitment that we want to obtain the certification, many of these initiatives were post trying to obtain that certification. So it's really been eye-opening to our employees. It's actually been very engaging. People have brought forth many new ideas on how we can improve some of these strategies. So this is more of a positive slide showing what we're doing and how we're going to obtain our true waste certification. The next slide will talk a little bit about some of our struggles. So next slide, please. So this really hits home with what Amy was talking about. There's only so much recycling can do at a facility, right? Driving like this PPE, plastic film recycling, although they're important initiatives, building language into our contracts is key. For example, we, as you have construction projects and you're working with third-party groups that are doing work at your site that could generate waste, how do you hold them accountable for making sure that those waste metrics aren't hitting yours, right? So this has been a learning opportunity for us. And as we try to obtain our certification, we know that we need to have stronger verbiage in our contracts that holds other people accountable. And some of the struggles with this is, especially being, such a large company, there isn't just one vendor that you're using, or buying supplies isn't always from a standard group of people. So being such a large company, you really have to have a robust program on sustainability and have consistency in what you expect from vendors. So that's one of the things that we see as a challenge here. And as part of this True Waste certification, it's something that we're working to improve. But a lot of the things that Amy was talking about initially are very, very key conversations to have with your contractors up front. Now, overall, we do have pulse checks at a site level. We review our metrics, what's our total waste and recycle generation. We do waste audits to make sure that everything is truly being recycled or recycled properly. One of the things that we're struggling with, but also improving, is trying to maintain a culture of sustainability, especially with such a dynamic work environment with people working on-site and off-site. You have these new initiatives that try to talk about, new recycling programs, but, only half the facility is here at one time. So, what I'm trying to drive with the small scope and larger scope is there's a lot that you can do at a site level. That's what I'm trying to capture. Small scope, but larger scope, it really goes beyond just what you can do on a day-to-day. It's working with your contractors and vendors and trying to build that language into supporting True Waste at that level. Next slide, please. So I think this is a really good transition into Denise's presentation. We are obviously a very large company trying to obtain our True Waste certification. And some of our wins are now we have this awareness on what we need to do, but one of our struggles is trying to build that verbiage with our contractors. And I think Denise will give you a very good example of what some of those success stories look like.
Thanks, Magda. Let me get into Denise's presentation and we'll go ahead and share that.
Thank you. All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. So as Amy mentioned, I am a principal of All About Waste. We are the leading company on True Zero Waste certifications in the world. We have the most projects registered under our belt with our clients, and very proud to say that we've been trying to change the way that the commercial buildings operate in the United States. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's a little bit about me. I actually started my career in sustainability in Brazil 20 years ago. The first job I got, it was a lead consultant, and I worked as a lead consultant for many, many years. So I have a lot of experience with the green building industry, mainly with LEED and other green building certifications. But but zero waste is always been my passion since I was 9 years old. And I actually got my first job with LEED projects because of construction waste. So again, I think I just want to share this a little bit about my background, because if you're hearing this conference and you not necessarily know what you want to do, or you're working on another department in your company, but waste is coming more into conversations and things like that, don't feel discouraged because you don't have experience. We're here to help. There's many professionals that can help you guys to navigate through this, I would say, new subject in sustainability. It's not new, but now it's getting more attention from all over the world and all different type of companies. Next slides, please. Okay, so my presentation is mainly focused on two case studies. So this is one of them. This is a very interesting case study because it's the first building in the world it's some commercial buildings with a multi-tenant building spaces and things like that. And then Also, they have a residential building as part of this, the scope of work that we work on. So it was a very, very challenging job because we were not used to something so different. In the residential building, it's interesting because it was, there was a lot of renters and even short, like an Airbnb renters in the building. So how to communicate, how to make sure we enforce or we engage them into the zero waste. And we will talk more about that. So this building is located in San Francisco, in California. It has around 500,000 square feet. And another thing I want to bring here is that they also, besides the True Zero Waste certification, they pursue they earn the LEED existing building certification. They're platinum. They have another certification called Fitwell, and they also earn a zero waste champion from the Recology program. I'm bringing that up because this shows the result of a group of people, a team that really took sustainability as very, very seriously, and they were able to really push the envelope, really raise the bar on this building. And it's a remarkable building. Like the mayor of San Francisco went to this building and did a tour and all that. So it really, the team here, it was a key factor for achieving all these achievements. Next slide. So this is a picture, I put the picture here because, so the man here in front of us wearing like a black sweater, he is actually the senior property manager of this building. And he really was a guy that drive his entire team, was a great leader. He is a great leader. He's not just, I'm saying it was because he's not working this project in this building anymore. He moved to another building. But this picture, for example, he one day during actually the process, the certification, the janitorial team didn't work because they were on strike or something like that. And he said, you know what, I'm going to go and pick it up the trash. So he was not afraid to leave his desk and go beyond, his role as a senior project manager, as a senior property management. So very, very, very nice team to work with. So again, this team was being very engaged with the entire process. They decided to, they first hire us to do a LEED waste audit. So we did that for them. And because of, the way that we reported the documentation, and we actually reported the data and everything from the waste audit, we indicated that True could be a possibility for them because they were really close to 90% diversion. So because of this, they decided to do waste audits every 6 months, and we start doing waste audits every 6 months, going beyond, again, the LEED certification that is required at least one waste audit per year. Another thing that really was a key for this project was ongoing education and awareness programs. So they created we helped them to create a resource, like a database kind of library that live in the project website that has a lot of resources, including like food donation and things like that. And also we set up monthly calls with the tenants to participate and discuss zero waste, we were like a resource for the tenants if they have questions, like simple questions, all the way from like, should I buy this compostable bag for the compostable stream, all the way to like, I'm creating my own EPP, environmental purchase policy, what should I put it in here? So it could be anything. So really like the monthly calls were really help to have everybody at least thinking for 30 minutes once a month about waste. all the collection points, none of the tenants has individual desk bins. Everybody moved to a central collection point. That's something we always recommend, with at least 3 streams and clear signage. Also, the key leaders, even the janitorial team, the tenants, and also the manager who was, and the owner of the residential building, he was involved since day one in this process. And he really helped us to drive this. Also, another important thing, in San Francisco, there is a law, if you're not diverting X amount, or if your contamination levels are beyond the local regulations, you need to have an on-site sorter. And even though they were beyond the regulations, they were much better in terms of diversion and contamination, they still kept the on-site sorter to even improve even more their waste diversion. And then another thing I thought it was very interesting that they decided to pursue, and we're seeing more clients going to that path, is they, similar to Megan was mentioning about like doing a waste audit or a gap analysis, we went straight to the pre-certification path, which is almost like a gap analysis that we did for them, but we achieved the pre-certification path. We worked with them, and then we decided to achieve the full certification after this exercise. Next slide, please. Some of the procurement best management practices here, we created, again, as part of the pre-certification path, there's 9 credits. It's all or nothing that you need to pursue. And one of them is to create an EPP, an environmental purchasing policy or procurement policy. So we created that during the pre-certification path, and we share that document with the entire Tishman Speyer team, which is like the property management, the owner of the building per se, and also the tenant. So every single tenant in this building, which has like more than 100 tenants, had access to the EPP, and they were able to adapt the EPP to their reality. And of course, besides having just the policy, is to really implement the policy in the building. So, you know, as Megan mentioned as well, like in all the break rooms and pantries, they all have reusables. All like office supplies has like recycled content, has a program for repair or donation and or reuse and things like that. So it was a very good experience for everybody on this. And then I think the second bullet point here, which is one of my favorite, I think there are few people that I know, or almost nobody, that is doing this. So every time we work with a client that it's not just starting their zero waste path, we created this vendor questionnaire. We have a template, and we adapt depending on what kind of building and the typology on our operations. We adapt this questionnaire to reflect the actual building operations. So the example that you see here in your screen, it's actually a vendor questionnaire, not for this project, but for actually a construction site that we're working on. So I just want to mention that also could be applicable for a construction site. And it's really like, there's 2 main reasons why we like to put this questionnaire in place. One is to start the conversation with the vendors, even that they will answer all the questions as a no. We're not doing, you know, a take back program. We're not doing like a bulk service, but at least we start a conversation. And that's what it's so important right now in the circularity or zero waste in industry. I always mention that because when I started working with LEED 20 years ago in Brazil, I remember going to like a paint company and asking them, can you please provide me your VOC content, your information about your paints, your MSDS and things like that. Then they get back to me and like, we never heard about this. And I said, well, if you don't do this, I will talk to your competitor, and I'm sure they have it. Soon enough, after a week, I have a VOC number from all the paints. So just starting the conversation, it could really change the industry. I saw that happening 20 years ago, and I still see that happening in different areas with different green building certifications, and true cannot be different. So we need to start this conversation with the vendors. Do not feel afraid of like asking questions, sending questionnaires like this. And then the second objective of sending this questionnaire is to understand of your supply chain, who are the ones that are already a little bit more forward in terms of zero waste and sustainability, or what are the vendors that not necessarily are ready. So you can prioritize your vendors and make sure that you give preference to vendors that are going above and beyond the status quo right now for zero waste. And as I mentioned, select vendors who are willing to become more sustainable. I think that's the best award, the best feedback you can give to a vendor if they are willing to do this, if they're willing to collaborate and partner with you on your zero waste goals, is to work with them, keep working with them. Next slide, please. Here are some savings of this project. I think it's important to bring that up. I always get these calls and emails and questions about like, oh, if I pursue the True Zero Waste certification, if I become zero waste, how much will cost? It's going to be more costly for me and my operations, and it's actually the opposite. And I think we need to make sure that we're counting the savings that we have when we start working before operating as a zero waste. So that's one of the reasons I bring it up here, because I always think if you're trying to convince or talk to your leadership or even your procurement team about zero waste initiatives, the idea is always to save money. We're helping the environment, but mainly also helping the company operations really to save money. Ideally, like it will be more cost effective if you buy reusables and buy a dishwasher and wash the dishes than buy single-use materials every month for your operation. So even like that, it's better for not just for the environment, but also for your finances. Next slide. This is the second case study, also in San Francisco. San Francisco is a great city or region to work with, because they have a lot of incentives, especially with Recology, who is the only waste hauler that operates in the city. There's a lot of incentives to become zero waste. So that's really important also to mention. This is the first zero waste building in San Francisco. And this been certified, probably I think is one of the first projects to be certified as a commercial building in the world, and is the largest high-rise building to certify as a true zero waste in the world. Next slide, please. So just gonna go really quick about here. They have a lot. They have in every single floor, they have several pantries. Every single pantry and break rooms has reusables and has bulk. So all like granolas, and of course this was before COVID, but all the granola, even like peanuts and pistachios, all the things were coming in bulk. So that was very sustainable. Again, also, they designed the building to not have the desk bins. They're all operating at central collection points. The central collection points were actually built in the core of the building. So it was designed, the building was designed for that. They have three-way streams at least. They have also shredding paper for in these central collection points, especially the ones that were close to like printing areas. And they have an amazing ongoing education and awareness program, including everything in the pantries, like why we should use reusables instead of single use and things like that. Next slide. Some of the procurement best management practices here. So we also create an EPP. We share with the procurement team. One of the cool things about most of the tech companies that we work with, including this one, they associate, that's very, very important. As Megan mentioned, not just have that in the contract, like the EPP and the zero waste goals that you have in terms of procurement, but also make sure you track that and affiliate that as a KPI. And if your vendor does not meet the KPI, what happens? So there's different ways that each tech companies, they manage that if vendors don't meet the KPI, but most of the vendors, I would say 99% of the vendors don't want to mess it up with their contracts with, their clients. So they follow the KPIs. And the KPIs could be starting simple, like, let's just focus, for example, again, on, toilet paper, paper towels, with the janitorial team, and then just office paper and any wood products that has FSC. Like, could be simple like that, but make sure you put that in your contract and then you track that. Do not forget to track because it's important. They select vendors who embrace sustainability and zero waste practices. Again, this is really important. You as a consumer, as a client, has the power to change the industry that you're working. You have the power as a consumer to change. If you ask things, people will start thinking about and make sure that they will serve you the way they should. So that's very important. And another thing that's very, very important for most of the tech companies that we work, it's like promote the zero waste culture among your coworkers and vendors. If somebody decided to not follow zero waste for some reason, they should be almost like afraid of bringing something that it's not sustainable and zero waste. So almost like normalize the zero waste culture among your coworkers and your vendors. Next slide. So here's some savings as well of the project. Just want to mention that this project, for example, was able to save $78,000 in diversion discount. So that's, again, an agreement that the city put in place with Recology to give discounts for buildings that operate as zero waste or have high diversion rates. I want to just point it out here. One final comment is you see some numbers here. We're not even counting on cost savings on the procurement, how much actually we're able to save money based on the decisions that we made when we're procuring, when we're purchasing things. So this is just like kind of the downstream savings. No, we're not counting about the dollars amount coming from the upstream savings. Next slide. I think that's pretty much my presentation. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much, everybody, to be here with me.
Thank you, Denise. I appreciate that. I do think Magna had to hop off. She had an unexpected meeting she had to attend to. So, but I do want to get into some questions. And if you do have any questions, please put them in the link or in the chat. So Denise, you were talking about the multi-tenant buildings, and oftentimes property management, doesn't have too much control over what tenants might purchase. You mentioned some of the the EPP, which is really helpful. Are there ways that you've seen to get tenants on board with the full building thing? Because even if one tenant's not doing the right thing, it can really impact the full building. Can you talk a little bit about how you've gotten around some of those challenges?
Sure. So there are a few tools that we can use. One of a very common tool that it's been actually used for LEED existing building, it's what they call like a green lease. So there's if you put in the lease, which is basically right, the contract between the property management and the tenants, that this building is pursuing zero waste, that you're required to have 3 streams and have like some goals and some language in the lease agreement, that will be fantastic. That also again, educational programs, it's very, very important to make sure, even that sometimes you have in a lease agreement, not necessarily people will remember that this is in the lease agreement, or they, that they need to divert. And like we do, for example, a lot of waste audits, and we see a lot during the waste audits, like e-waste, like, batteries or even computers and all kinds of e-waste in the recycling stream. So that happened. Of course, people know that, in the back of their mind, they know that, especially, most of the states, especially in the United States, most of the companies, the people know that you're not supposed to put waste on recyclables, but they forget, or they're like too busy, or they don't know. So having an ongoing education program, it really makes sure that everybody is in the same page. They're like on top of the subject, you're refreshing people's mind, and so on. So there's several ways you can keep the tenant engaged.
Thank you. I don't see any questions. If you guys have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Denise, I was curious. I know that, we talk a lot about true certification, with the focus on zero waste. I know there's credits related to some of the vendor engagement with the upstream management credits. Can you maybe talk a little bit about some of those? Like, are those easy to obtain? Do you find it challenging? Are there some that lend themselves, easier than others? Or do they kind of overlap? Is there synergies there? What has been, in your experience, achieving those credits?
They're not, well, depend on, again, the building, depend on where the building is located, what kind of operation. So a perfect example, we're working with a mattress company where they have a warehouse. So we're certifying their warehouse, and they're located in Seattle, so not necessarily in California, which normally has a more restrict regulations around waste. And the vendors that provide, it's a very specific vendors that provide, things for a mattress company versus a tech company versus a multi-tenant building. And, so it depends a lot on the building operations, typology, location, and so on. One of the things I always mention to my clients are, don't feel discouraged. Even that we get one vendor, and that's what I like about True, is that we are trying to do some progress. Not, the industry is just like, it's a baby industry. I always say this, because even if you get one vendor to work with you, it's better than nothing. So try to focus. Again, that's one of the reasons we like to send this questionnaire. See which vendor is more open for this, or is already working towards zero waste or something like that, and work with that vendor and help them to help you. So again, it could be one vendor. Don't get like crazy about, trying to get 100 vendors or like even 10 vendors. Try to work with one or two, and you can be successful on the EPP credits. Again, the construction site that we've been working, the construction sites that we're working, they have like, I don't know, thousands of vendors. And as Megan mentioned, normally what happened is that we don't go, the general contractor doesn't go directly to the manufacturer. There is a trade, which is basically almost like a broker or a service provider who actually, is a third party who actually buy that product, and that product could even come from another third party. So the supply chain, it's really hard to work with, but what we've been doing, it's like maybe go to the design team, and the design team has a better leverage with the carpet manufacturer and say, hey, carpet manufacturer, can you please provide me carpet tiles in a reusable container instead of a bunch of plastic and cardboard and things like that. So I think it all depends, again, on the building, the typology, the operations, and so on. And but then identify the different way, who is the vendor that they're more open to work with you, and stick with him or her, and work with them.
Yeah, I know as a vendor or service provider, we are often asked for, how we approach different, it's not always zero waste, but a lot of different sustainability goals. And so when there are questions that we're asked about zero waste, that is a strong component of something that we can provide. And so we do try to have that dialogue and open the dialogue. And oftentimes finding the right people and the right organizations does help. Sometimes what I find is that maybe a procurement person has been given this KPI to put in an RFP, but they don't necessarily have the background or any information on it. And so sometimes being able to have further conversations of how that KPI impacts, operations, and having conversations across departmental lines can really be helpful in making sure the vendors are in the loop, and then different people on our team too are in the loop, so we can be able to provide what is needed to help meet those zero waste objectives for our clients.
It's simple. Like, don't be ashamed of, keep it simple. Like, it could be one KPI, as I mentioned, or for example, for you, you have at least 2 KPIs kind of that clearly it's related to true for paper towels and toilet paper. So it could be just that. And if you make a progress with that, that's great. And then the next year you get another KPI and so on. So do not be afraid to keep it simple and start it small.
Yeah, and I think I'll just reiterate, so also making sure that it's in the scope of work. There's a lot of times where we're not purchasing maybe paper towels for a client. They decide to purchase that somewhere else. And so we don't have any control over that or visibility, which is hard for us, if it's assigned as a KPI to us. So again, understanding what is and what's not in that scope of work, and then how to make that change, and then open up that dialogue to have visibility into those other areas, so that all the people are talking.
Great point.
Let's see, we have just 5 minutes left in our session. I know they'll probably kick us out soon. Does anybody ask again if anybody has any questions, or if there's any points of Denise's case study, since she's still on here, to ask?
And feel free to email me, and we can continue this conversation. I'm sure questions will come when you start working on your projects in your facility. So feel free to email me or Amy with your questions.
I guess any final thoughts? Oh, hey, a question. Is there value, or do you build a network of vendors committed to zero waste to refer your facilities clients to?
What do you mean? Like, what is the value of doing that?
Or maybe is there a value to having a network of vendors that are already maybe on board with this?
Of course, there's a value. Yeah.
Paraphrasing correctly, Evelyn?
Yeah. So, for example, again, this we're going to use the construction project that I'm working on. So it's a project near San Francisco, but it's the general contractor. It's a large general contractor. They have buildings and construction all over the US, maybe even outside of US. But anyhow, definitely in the US, several construction projects. So if we identify, 2 or 3 vendors, let's say, that are pursuing, or they are embracing zero waste and they're partnering with them, it will be easier for them to do a true zero waste and lead in the next project. It's more effective to work with those vendors. I think Evelyn want to mention something. Can she? No? Okay.
I think to your question on regional too, I mean, I think it depends on the service and the vendor. Sometimes you can get maybe like economies of scale for like national networks to service if you have lots of locations, but a lot of times, sometimes zero waste and circular economy things are really local and regional. And so sometimes having that local network of vendors is a good way to go. I don't know if that answers your question or that was your question.
Yeah, I think the value is you make a decision more effective, like, again, it's a terrible example, but that Target has that product. So you're going to save time, instead of looking for vendors, that Target, for example, has that product. So you're going to go straight to that. So you definitely have a more effective operations. And I think the indirect value is that the competitor of that vendor you selected that you've been working with will start changing their way of doing business because they want to be working with you or working with other companies such as your company. So it really helped to drive the industry, change the industry.
Yeah, and I think it's also important too, if you're vetting vendors, like multiple vendors that to provide the same service, to really understand what you're asking. And when you're vetting and looking at what services they provide, like go beyond kind of those minimum questions and include those zero waste components in those.
Totally.
We've been asked if the concurrent sessions will be available for viewing on demand as well. Portia, do you have an answer for that? Or Bonnie?
The answer is yes. It's going to be a few weeks to get them organized and cleaned up, but they will be available a few weeks after the fact.
Great, thank you very much. Well, I see we are just with a minute left in our allocated time. So I want to thank everybody for joining. Thanks to Denise and for Magna, and for you all for spending time in our session today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. On that note, I will close the meeting.
Thank you.
Bye.